whatever he's jamming on at the time is what the class is about. And they actually had Liebler on this call on Monday. So,
cool.
And I had Werby last week. So this is like my Detroit week, and you're my concluding visitor. All right, we're live now. I'm Andrew Smith. This is Topics in American Lit, the American Mixtape, and we have spent 2 weeks learning about Detroit. And when I was new in the corridor, which is a neighborhood south of Wayne State, where there was bars and like house parties and the Dally in the Alley Street Festival, there was a scene. There was coffee shops. It's like what closest would probably be East Nashville, certain parts of Knoxville or Chattanooga, maybe parts of Memphis that you all are familiar with. Every big city has that kind of neighborhood where the rents are cheap, or where they used to be cheap, where the rents were formerly cheap, and where you had the artist scene in Detroit. And so I don't remember when I first met our guest, Danny Kroha, but he was in several bands. He was in the Gories. He was in the Demolition Doll Rods. He's got 2 solo albums out now on Third Man Records, which are very traditional blues-based albums, very much in the tradition of what we were talking about at the beginning of the class, y'all, when I taught you guys about blues, gospel, and folk music. And Danny's been kind of an anchor to the Detroit music scene for his entire life. And he stayed. I chickened out and I left. I got scared when I had a kid, and I was like,
you also got beat up, didn't you, at one point?
Yeah, I got jumped really bad.
You got jumped and your jaw got broken, didn't it?
My face, actually, I've metal in my face. Yeah,
wow.
my whole head got busted up. But we used to run shows. That's kind of how I know Danny, is I would participate in booking shows at different venues, and I was kind of an MC at some gigs. And I think you might have played one of the Halloween shows that Sybil and I did at the old funeral home. There was an old funeral home that for a period class was a rock and roll venue, and we would have these like completely over the top Halloween parties. And the magician Harry Houdini died at the Majestic Theater and was laid out at that funeral home, the Art Center Music School. And there was a couple dudes from like a couple of different bands. They had their
I want to interject here and say that my great grandmother was also laid out at that funeral home.
Well, I'm going to tip to you, so you won't be interjecting anymore. So I don't think it's possible for them to even fully comprehend what Detroit is like and what the scene was like. But we learned about the scene from the 60s from Peter Werby, and we learned about the poetry scene from Professor Liebler. So you're here to tell us about the Detroit rock scene from the time you got there till today. And we're just going to tell stories on ourselves. We're going to tell on ourselves. Don't embarrass me too much. I try to keep somewhat of a sober profile here in Cookeville, Tennessee, but Detroit is my roots. I lived in that neighborhood, and we interacted for about 8 years. I was there from about 88 to 94. So,
well, I don't think you were doing anything crazy when you got jumped. You were just riding your bike, weren't you?
That's correct. You have a good memory, sir. That's exactly correct. Why don't you tell us about where you're from, how you ended up in the neighborhood?
Okay, so I was born. I was born and raised in Detroit. I grew up on the north side of Detroit near 8 Mile Road, the famous M&M's 8 Mile Road. I grew up right near there, and went to grade school and high school in Detroit. Went to Catholic schools. My family's Catholic, so went to a school called Jesu for grade school, and then University of Detroit High School, all within the city of Detroit. In high school, I wasn't really into the contemporary music of the time. I liked 60s music, and I started getting into FM rock radio. This is late 70s, early 80s. And, I started liking stuff like the Kinks, early Kinks and Rolling Stones and the Who, and all that 60s stuff was really exciting to me. So I wanted to discover more about that stuff and get into it and start playing that kind of music. And I really was drawn to gospel and blues music, which wasn't a tradition in my family at all. But around Detroit, you're always aware of that kind of stuff because it's everywhere and in the air and on the radio and all that. And I became drawn to, that kind of music. So then, you know, getting just like, you know, a lot of people when you're a young person and a teenager, you know, you start to discover that you're not really that into the mainstream culture and you want to find something different, you know. And so in order to do that, you need to go to the cultural center of your city and find out what's going on down there and what is the counterculture, you know. And at that point, the counterculture was down by Wayne State University, what was known as the Cass Corridor, named after a street called Cass Avenue. Now, of course, you know, like Andrew said, the counterculture tends to gravitate towards places where the rent is cheap. And places where the rent is cheap is usually places where most white people are scared to go, meaning Afro-American neighborhoods, or, you know, neighborhoods where there's a lot of bars and there's prostitution going on and there's drug sales happening. And not that that has anything to do with being African-American at all. It does not. But unfortunately, that our cities have were structured that way and have become structured that way. So yeah, so you're looking for the counterculture, and so you go to a place where art is happening and the rents are cheap and artists can just do what they want to do. You can play guitar and paint and write poetry, you know, whatever it is you want to do, and not be bothered too much and not have to pay that much for rent. So the place where that was happening was down in this neighborhood south of Wayne State University. Now, the other thing about these neighborhoods that attract the counterculture is that they tend to be old. They tend to be older neighborhoods. The houses are 100, 120 years old. You know, it's a lot of stuff from the 1890s and early 1900s, which to a lot of people is not that attractive because they want new stuff. They want a new house. They want everything to be nice and new and in the suburbs. But there's another set of people who really appreciates old stuff and really appreciates historical neighborhoods and wants to save that kind of thing and preserve that kind of thing. So that neighborhood is a very old neighborhood. A lot of the houses are from the 1890s and early 1900s. And in my opinion, they're very beautiful. And in the 80s, there was a lot more of that stuff left. A lot of it's been torn down now because it was just neglected. And you know, unfortunately, you know, poor people have been ghettoized and forced to live in older neighborhoods, you know, and often can't afford to keep the houses fixed up. And houses like that require a lot of maintenance and they fall into disrepair. And then there's there's a whole other history of how historic neighborhoods fall into disrepair because of the system and the way the system is set up. But anyway, that kind of stuff is attractive to me. All the old houses. In fact, I live in the house I'm speaking from now is built in the 1890s. It's in a, you know, old historic neighborhood that unfortunately not much left of it. But my wife and I fixed it up. And so I'm into that kind of stuff. Not everybody.
Are you in Brush Park or where are you?
No, I'm in Pole Town East.
Okay, so I lived in Brush Park. I lived in the corridor
Very
proper.
similar.
I lived in Woodbridge.
Yeah,
and you would have a couple of really nice houses that somebody had been working on, and then you'd see like a house that looked like a haunted house or like, you know, a demolition site or like a war zone house or
Detroit
a drug house.
Right. So Detroit had a lot of, you know, boarded up, burned out houses, which look very scary. But if you go down there and actually go around, live there, it's not as scary as it looks. I mean, it is. But
Jim Jarmusch made a horror movie in Detroit just a few years ago. I lived in that house, 82 Alfred Street, when I first got there in 87. And I was actually trying to do like a college thing in Ohio, actually where the town's become kind of famous now because of Dave Chappelle. But I lived in Yellow Springs and I went to Antioch for a year and in the 80s. And then I dropped out. And when I dropped out, I moved straight to Alfred Street. And this family that was trying to fix it up and really couldn't afford to fix it up had a bunch of little kids, and I did daycare. I took care of their kids in exchange for free. I had a free house there. That was my first And I lived, Danny, I must have lived like in 15 different homes in that 7 or 8 years. So I moved about every 6 months during that time.
They're all like beautiful,
How long have you been in
1890s mansions and that kind of thing. So what now? What?
Your house that you're in now, how long have you been there?
Like 2 or 3 years.
And are you into, do you have other things that you're into as far as cultivating the antiquity? Like, have you also, like, is your furniture and is the aesthetic of your whole home kind of built around this kind of, so do you
No, I'm not into like
anything?
I'm not into the total like historic correctness or whatever, I mean, I like, fixing up the house, keeping the basic integrity of the house intact, but no, it's not filled with period antiques and that kind of thing. I mean, I can't really afford that kind of stuff. Most of the furniture is trash picked, but hopefully there's some style to it, But yeah, I mean, it's like in that Jim Jarmusch movie, there's like this beauty in the decay, and there's a way to decorate it that sort of goes along with that aesthetic and blah blah blah. But anyway, so artists are generally attracted to these sort of areas, and they're beautiful in their decay, which they definitely are. So I was like hanging around down there, and like that's where like the hardcore punk scene was starting in Detroit in like '83. They had this place called the Freezer Theater, and the Necros and Negative Approach and all those guys were playing there. And then, as it got into 84, 85, 86, 87, mid 80s, Rob Tyner, the lead singer of the MC5, started a open mic night at a church on the Wayne State University campus called St. Andrew's Church. And at that, I would see Rob Tyner at the Dally in the Alley also, which was a street fair put on in that same neighborhood that would attract bands and artists. And it started out very small. It got huge after a while, but there'd be bands, artists, DJs, people selling used clothes and furniture. It's kind of a bizarre affair sort of thing. I would see Rob Tyner, singer from the MC5, walking around there. Unfortunately, at that time, I didn't really know much about who he was. And
Wasn't he playing like I think he was playing like dulcimer or something. He was really into a folk thing, and
I can tell you about that. You want to know? Okay, so when Rob Tyner,
I was 18. You must be older than me, Danny. I went when I was 18. That was like the first. That was one of the first. That and the Greystone were like some of the first things I did. But that coffee house at St. Andrew's Church was like a game changer for me. It changed my whole life. I loved it.
Okay. Oh wow. Okay. Cool. You're familiar with it. Okay. Good. So yeah. So Rob Tyner did these open mics. Anybody could go up there and do anything, poetry, music. I don't know if you got up there and did anything at that point. Did you?
I have a flyer.
Okay. I would like to see it because I don't
have a flyer with, and it says Andy Smith. And it was one of the, do you remember the guy Craig that used to make the flyers? I mean, they're all like hand drawn.
I'm sure if I saw it, I would remember.
With collages. I've got one of your flyers too. I've got a whole like album of old flyer art. I need to start posting some of that stuff. You'll absolutely love it. And so I was driving from Southfield at that time, and they didn't close till 4 a.m.
Wow, I don't remember that. Wow.
They started at 8 p.m. and they went.
Okay, you know what? That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so my band, the Gories, was just starting out at that point. I was, I don't know, 21, I guess is like 86, something like that. And we knew like 4 songs, and we could barely play our instruments. We were like garage band, what's known now as garage rock. They, Jack White kind of made it famous, but we started out doing that kind of stuff in the 80s, So we signed up for this open mic night, and we had to wait till everybody else was done. So we were sitting there. It was probably 2 o'clock in the morning before we got to play. And one of the things we had to sit through was Rob Tyner with his auto harp, playing the auto harp and singing really corny songs about really corny, nostalgic songs about his rock and roll days at the Grandy. And he was only like 40 at this point. I mean, it's amazing to think that he had lived so much life by that point that he was like he was singing like what a 70-year-old would be doing now. I mean, to us, he just sounded like some washed up hippie. It's bad. There's actually a video on YouTube of him playing the guitar. It's bad. But anyway, so we're sitting through that. Finally, that's all done. We're practically falling asleep. And Rob Tyner says, okay, we got this young band now coming up the Gories. And we got up there and we barely made it through the 4 songs we knew. But thank God to Rob Tyner for letting us get up there and get on that stage and do our thing. And, you know, I came to know later how important he was in the Detroit music scene and what an incredibly powerful voice he had. You know, unfortunately at that time I wasn't really aware. You know, I was young and dumb and I didn't really care. So we started, you know, playing around Cass Corridor area, St. Andrew's Church. Like you said, the old funeral home had the community concert series, right? I'm not sure who ran that, but it was a very arty collective, and they would get bands from the neighborhood and they would play at the old funeral home and another venue. Maybe it was St. Andrew's Church, Unitarian Church.
Also,
right?
the down in Harmony Park, there was that loft. We were there
Yes.
for years. That loft in Harmony Park was amazing.
Yep. So
it's all the same thing. So St. Andrew's Church was the genesis of the community concert series.
Okay.
And then we moved around. We moved to Harmony Park, and then we moved to Art Center Music School. And it only went on for about 5 years. It only lasted about 5 or 6 years, because I remembered it was in decline. In the old freezer space, I was part of the collective that opened the 404, and we had a lot of punk shows. But that was a 90s. That was 90s punk.
The Gories did play 404, like probably almost the last year together. That would have been like 91, 90, 91, somewhere around there, 92 maybe, but probably 91. So we were playing around, kicking around there, and there was the old funeral home where my great grandmother was laid out. Houdini was laid out. It was an amazing 1890s mansion with this incredible Art Deco sort of stone mausoleum thing attached to it that by the grace of God is still standing in Detroit. Somehow that building made it. But yeah, they would have these shows at this old funeral home. And I don't know what else.
Did you guys start writing your own music and like
right away, like from day one?
You were putting out like 7 inches and you toured. Tell us a little bit about that first wave of your career with the Gories. Just a little bit about like
so we started out in the Cass Corridor in that scene, playing those open mics and venues and stuff like that. Started writing more songs and getting booked at other bars. Hamtramck was happening, a couple bars in Hamtramck where you could play original music, and we were doing that. And put out some records, put out an album on a local label, and then we got the attention of Alex Chilton, who was a famous singer, songwriter. He was the singer of the Box Tops. He did that song, The Letter, in the 60s. This is probably ancient history to you guys, if you even know what the hell I'm talking about. He had a band, but anyway, he produced an album with us, which gave us some clout. And then we went over and toured in Europe, and we did one more album that was recorded in a garage in the Cass Corridor. But our second album with Alex Chilton was recorded in Memphis, in Tennessee, because he was from Memphis. So, we were down there back in 1990. We broke up in 92, and then the band became much better known in the years after that, it wasn't really until the 2000s that we became better known, because then the Detroit garage rock scene blew up because of Jack White. Jack White got popular in the early 2000s. And then he started talking about who influenced him. And one of the bands he talked about was the Gories, which was my band. So then we got a bunch of notoriety from that, reformed in 2009, 2010. And we've been doing shows on and off since,
I'm so ready. I want to go right now. I want to go to a Gories show tonight. I wish I could go.
Oh, man. Well, we got 2 shows in Los Angeles in June 16th and 17th. So if you Can
I
get out
can't.
there.
I'm actually. That's actually when I'm going to be in Detroit. I'm going to be in Detroit that around that time.
Okay.
So, so how hard has it been to sustain, you know, an underground rock career at? So you said you were 21 in 86, so you're a little bit older than me. I'm 54. That would put you at about 57, 8 or something like that.
I'm 56. I'll be 57 this spring.
So how have you managed to, and what is it about this life that, because you just put out two amazing kind of like old timey blues records back to back that are just and I finally got into really listening to them and reading the liner notes, and I put some on my radio show. I've been doing my radio show, Danny, for 15 years on a college station here in Cookville.
Wow.
But I was making all of my shows on a computer, so I was using all digital. I was digitally sourcing all of my my content, and so I would make my playlist in advance, and it became very stale. And then I was also only playing stuff that everybody else could find, and
Right.
at the same time I amassed this huge vinyl collection that I found myself never listening to, because it's hard to take your turntable with you when you're, you know, hopping around town like I do. So I started doing my show playing only vinyl and cassette and CD, and it's been a game changer. And so I was reading your liner notes when I played your music the other day on the show, and I just couldn't believe how epically like original your approach to these traditional songs was, in terms of like, okay, I'm going to play, you're like, I'm going to play, what was it? The Saw. Is that right? You're playing the Saw. Aren't you playing like a, or what's the thing? You're playing some very weird, like,
I have a one string instrument. In fact, it's right at two hand here, as the British say. It's right two hand. It is an old,
that thing, yeah.
Yeah,
what is that
play it
called?
with a slide. I mean, it was an old folk instrument, excuse me, known as a diddley bow.
That's what you were playing, the diddley bow.
Yeah.
I knew it. I don't know why I thought you were playing a song. Can you do something? I know I should have asked you this over the. I've been messaging Danny for like 3 months about today, and I didn't say, well, you're going to play something. Can you play something really
Unfortunately, quick? You can't. It's hard to see, but where's the? Anyway, there's only one string. It looks like some kind of Chinese instrument, but it was made just to be as simple as possible to teach people the basics of music, I guess. And this particular instrument was probably made, I don't know, around 1920 or maybe a little bit before then. It was mass produced by a company that made all kinds of crazy string instruments. So it's really out of tune, but. But yeah, it sounds really weird, and of course, I'm very attracted to the weirdness of it.
That's got that kind of like, that's definitely got that Delta sound. So I was trying to explain to them how, like, and I don't know that I even understand it, so it's hard for me to explain something that's so amazing to me, but how Detroit and the Delta are somehow connected. So
okay, so I'll talk a bit about that.
Sing a couple bars of something with that thing for me, okay. and then tell us about it. Yeah.
So the song I was playing, I'm sorry, Andy, the string is super loose. It's really out of tune. I'm not prepared to do that. But I can tell you why Detroit is the way it is. It's because of the automobile industry, which is hard to imagine how gigantic the automobile industry was here, how innovative, how much it attracted people from all over the world to come to Detroit to work in the automobile industry. They paid the more money than any factory job had ever paid before. And tons of people came from Europe, Poland, Southern Italy, England, Scotland, everywhere. And then also people came from the South, especially during World War I, when all the white people went to fight in World War I in Europe, and they needed folks to work in the factories. Before that, black folks weren't allowed to have good factory jobs. They were only allowed to work on the farm for the most part. but they were desperate for workers, and so during World War I, they let black folks have good paying factory jobs, and black folks moved from the South, where they were working little bits of land for almost nothing, to go north and work in the factory and make a lot of money. So black folks like just moved up to Detroit and Chicago and Cleveland, places like that, and just in droves by the thousands. And that happened during World War I and during World War II. So not only, black folks, but white people too, white people from Kentucky and Tennessee, the hillbilly guys moved to Detroit to get good paying factory jobs, get out of the coal mines and that kind of labor, which was incredibly hard. So Detroit is extremely rich in that kind of music, like working class folk music, country music. I mean, blues is basically black people's country music, So Detroit became super rich in country music. Now, also at that time, the educational system was much better than it is now, because the government actually had an interest in educating people well, because they needed well-educated people to work in skilled labor. Now they don't, because all the labor is in China. They've outsourced everything and looked for cheaper labor globally. But at that time, the government had an interest in a well-educated population. So public education was good. And music education in public schools was very good. So people who before didn't have access to good public education now did, because they're working in industrialized city, making decent money. There were good schools. They learned a lot about music, and a very good jazz scene sprouted from this fertile educational environment of the Detroit public school system. So, not only did you have a lot of country music and country folks making blues and that kind of stuff, you also had this increased sophistication of jazz, and also, a more sophisticated pop music like Motown. So Detroit is incredibly rich because of all the people from the South who moved here, and all the people who came from so many different places to come here. And that made, this scene incredibly rich.
There's now a ton of people who retired and came here, or wanted to get a little bit warmer or get away from where you got jumped. Like I wanted to get away when my daughter Ruby, who's now almost 30, was born. I wanted to get away from the neighborhood where I got jumped. But I used to tease my friends. I said, well, Jack White was just copying Sun Frog, because I was like, because I don't think I've ever met Jack White. I've seen him play several times, but he literally, his migration was about 5 or 10 years after mine. And then of course he built this kind of this mysterious empire, with the project, and you somehow got involved in that. And they have a plant. So Canfield used to be just, there was the restaurant there right next to this restaurant that's been around forever. They built an actual record pressing plant.
Right.
A lot of us all live just a couple of blocks from there. It's just one street up from where the 404 used to be. I think there's a bakery. There's a bakery there now, and I think they've turned it back into Cobb's Corner at the old food hall.
Cobb's
but
Corner.
on Gainesville, they have an actual plant where they press albums.
Yes, they do.
Was your album? Do you know if yours was actually pressed there in the Detroit plant?
I think probably my second solo album was pressed there. I'm pretty sure it was.
So this is going to end in about 12 minutes. I want to give them a chance to ask you questions, and I want to take it off the recording. And I want to play at least one song for them off of YouTube. I should have done that before today, but that's my bad. What song should we listen to out of your vast catalog? And then I'll let them ask some questions. Or I'm just going to type you into. I'm going to type into one of your oldies in here into YouTube and see what comes up. If you have a good one that you know of, I don't know if you ever get asked to send stuff around. Here you are in '89 in Ann Arbor, and it's actually live. It's got 60,000 views. We'll actually see what you look like. Can I show that one?
Sure.
Okay, let me grab the
I don't
link
even
here.
know what this is.
Okay, so we're gonna see what Danny was like back in the day. I think they need to see that.
Is
And
it
then,
Gories?
yeah, I think they need to see this. And then
Okay.
after this, then we'll have about 10 minutes. And they usually like to type their questions in the chat.
Oh, okay.
And there's a little button at the bottom right that looks like a text message button.
Yeah,
And
I see it. Okay.
yeah, so hold on, class. Here, you guys are Danny. This looks so good. You look so good. This is going to be really great. Hold on a second. 1 second here.
I hope so.
Oh no, this is worth you all showing up for class this morning just to see this. I'm so glad I thought of this at the last minute. I'm sorry I didn't think about it before to warn you of it. But here we go.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Fast forward, man. There we go. There's me. Oh yeah, baby. Why'd you stop?
That's what I get. That's what I get when I don't know what I'm getting. It looks like it's an entire concert.
It is. It was a cable TV show that we appeared on in 1988.
So let's see if there's.
No, this is good. Play that. It's just about to be a good song.
Okay, all right. We'll keep going. My bad. Okay, good. I wasn't sure. All I saw was the Night Train, and I was like,
no, it'll go back to showing the band. This is
that's Detroit though. Bad, cheap booze.
Oh yeah. There we go.
Down. Really, girl, you wanna mess around? Baby, can you feel it? I just wanna hold and squeeze you tight. I just wanna be with you all night. Make love.
All right, that's it. There we go. It's some garage.
Well, now I know why the White Stripes are completely derivative of you. I mean, now
not completely, but you get the picture.
That is definitely a thing. All right, class. You guys know what to do. You guys have been on many calls this semester where we've had a guest. Please drop your questions into the chat. And Danny, thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording. I hope that YouTube doesn't flag that. I meant to stop the recording before the music. Sometimes if you put music in a video, it breaks the internet.